the sunken civilization that should not exist. 30 meters beneath the waves, a diver's flashlight swept across something impossible, an enormous staircase carved into solid stone, descending into a darkness untouched for thousands of years. Each step was unnervingly precise, as if shaped by the hands of master builders. Yet this structure wasn't just old. It was ancient beyond comprehension. Older than the pyramids, older than the first cities, older than the dawn of agriculture itself. And the moment the diver pressed his palm against the stone, he felt something that shouldn't have been there. A cold, deliberate cut, a mark of intention. Someone, some ancient people, built this. But according to every textbook ever written, no civilization on Earth should have been capable of carving stone like this 12,000 years ago. Humans at that time were supposed to be scattered hunter-gatherers with no permanent settlements, no architecture, no concept of construction. And yet here was proof. Massive blocks aligned in geometric patterns, platforms rising from the seafloor like the foundation stones of a forgotten city. And this wasn't a lone anomaly. Across the world, divers and researchers are uncovering submerged structures, walls, terraces, roads, monoliths, lying tens of meters below the ocean's surface. From Japan to India, from the Mediterranean to the Bahamas, these ruins are all far too old, far too precise, and far too structured to fit comfortably into our accepted history. Every one of them contradicts the timeline we were taught. If these ruins are real and the evidence keeps mounting, they don't just rewrite a date, they rewrite human history itself. Tonight, we explore the sunken civilization that should not exist, and the truth concealed beneath the waves. The story begins long before the first temples rose, long before the first cities emerged from the desert sands. Our journey takes us back to a time when the world was unrecognizable, when colossal ice sheets covered continents and oceans were more than 100 meters lower than they are today. Yet beneath those ancient coastlines, now swallowed by the sea, lie structures suggesting that early humans were far more capable than we ever believed. They carved stone, they shaped platforms, they built terraces, they created architecture tens of thousands of years before any civilization entered the historical record. Let's start with the most famous example. Off the coast of Japan lies the Yonaguni Monument, an immense underwater structure rising from the ocean floor like a submerged cigarette. Its sharp angles, sweeping platforms, and towering staircases seem almost too precise to be natural. Mainstream geologists argue it's simply an unusual rock formation. But divers and independent researchers insist the structure is deliberate, its geometry too complex, its surfaces too refined, its layout too intentional. And here's what most people don't know. Yonaguni isn't one structure, it's a complex. It has multiple levels, interconnected platforms, linear corridors, massive terraces, and shapes resembling plazas, gates, and ceremonial spaces. Some divers claim to see remnants of tool marks etched faintly into the stone, patterns too regular to be attributed to erosion. Whether these impressions are genuine or not, something about Yonaguni feels engineered, purposeful, intentional. But Yonaguni is only the first breadcrumb in a global trail. Travel southwest across the Indian Ocean, and you arrive at the Gulf of Combat. Beneath the murky waters, sonar scans revealed something astonishing. Geometric shapes arranged in consistent patterns, rectangular outlines, linear alignments, and artifacts buried deep in the seabed, carved stone, beads, fossilized wooden fragments. If the dating holds true, these remains may predate the Indus Valley civilization by thousands of years, implying the existence of an even more ancient culture, once thriving where the ocean now lies. In the Mediterranean, off the coast of Sicily, divers discovered an immense megalith weighing over 15 tons. Split perfectly down the center, it appears to have been cut by deliberate human hands. In the Bahamas, the Bimini Road stretches across the seafloor like a paved highway, leading into the abyss, flat stone blocks placed in patterns resembling a primitive roadway. Individually, each site could be dismissed as coincidence. Together, they form an unmistakable pattern, a pattern pointing to one stunning possibility. Early humans, far older than any known civilization, may have built coastal structures long before recorded history began. And when the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose, those coastal settlements drowned, leaving only stone fragments behind as silent witnesses. Let's step deeper into the past, not in fantasy but in evidence. Around 11,000 BCE, the world was a place of violent transformation. Colossal ice sheets shrank. Temperatures climbed unpredictably. Sea levels surged over 300 feet. Entire regions, once fertile, lively, and densely inhabited, vanished beneath the encroaching oceans. Huge coastal plains that once supported rivers, forests, and human life are now buried underwater. Imagine living during this time. Your community settles along a wide, fertile shoreline. You build your life around the rhythms of the ocean. You fish, hunt, carve stone, and gather beneath open skies. Over generations, your people shape terraces for ceremonies, carve markers for travel, build platforms for gathering. You create a sacred place, a space connected to the land, the sea, and the ancestral spirits. Then, the world changes. Warm winds arrive. Storms intensify. The shoreline creeps closer every season. One generation watches the high tide touch the outskirts of their gathering place. The next finds the waves lapping against their terraces. The next sees the ocean swallow everything they built. Your sacred spaces disappear beneath the rising waters. Your people flee inland. Your stories become whispers and warnings, memories of a drowning world. Thousands of years later, divers rediscover what remains. The staircases you carved, the platforms you leveled, the walls you shaped, the terraces where your ancestors danced. Your civilization is gone, but the stone remembers. This leads us to a deeper, more haunting question than who built these. The real question is this: how much of human history has the ocean taken from us? Because underwater archaeology reveals only fragments, tiny glimmers of a world erased not by war, not by conquest, but by nature itself. And here's the part that unsettles researchers the most. Every submerged ruin sits precisely where ancient coastlines once existed. This is not chaos. This is not chance. This is the footprint of a forgotten world. Now, let's go deeper, literally and figuratively. Divers often speak of a strange presence when exploring these ruins. As they descend, their lights reveal edges, straight edges too clean to be natural. They swim through corridors that look carved. They find platforms perfectly level, as if shaped deliberately for rituals or gatherings. Nature can imitate architecture, but nature does not build complexes. Nature does not build geometric layouts. Nature does not build identical patterns across continents. The deeper you look, the harder the natural explanation narrative becomes, because if even one of these structures is truly man-made, then everything we believe about early human civilization collapses. It means humans achieved social organization, architectural planning, and monumental construction long before the rise of Sumer or Egypt or any known culture. It means humanity rose once before, and the ocean erased it. This is not just archaeology. This is a revolution in understanding who we are. Across Japan, India, the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and beyond, submerged structures share patterns that suggest intention. Terraces aligned with the sun, platforms shaped for gathering, staircases carved from single blocks, megaliths arranged like markers. These ruins sit exactly where ancient coastlines once stretched before the sea reclaimed them. They are whispers of a forgotten world, a world swallowed by water, but not erased. To understand how much of our past may be hiding beneath the waves, we need to reconstruct the world as it existed at the end of the Ice Age, not as a dry line in a history book, but as a living landscape filled with real people, real challenges, and real ingenuity. Humanity during this era was not primitive. They were adaptive, intelligent, and deeply connected to the land and sea. And most importantly, they built their lives around coastlines. Because coastlines were ideal, freshwater rivers flowed into the ocean, fish and marine life offered endless supply of food, migratory animals roamed nearby, cliffs and rocky outcrops provided natural shelter, and ocean currents shaped predictable weather patterns. If early humans were going to build anything permanent, the coast was the place to do it. But the world they lived in was unstable. Climate change wasn't a slow shift, it was an accelerating crisis. Ice sheets melted, glacial lakes burst, sea levels surged, weather patterns went wild, entire habitats shifted. What had been dry land for tens of thousands of years became ocean in a matter of generations. And with the rising tides, entire civilizations vanished, not slowly, not peacefully, but violently, buried beneath the waves before their people even had time to comprehend what was happening. These weren't small floods, these were world-changing events. When the ice melted, the oceans rose by more than 120 meters. That's enough to submerge skyscrapers, enough to erase cities, enough to turn vast continents into underwater graveyards. Imagine standing on your shoreline, watching the horizon swallow your world. The sacred platform where your ancestors once gathered, gone. The long stone terrace carved by your elders, gone. The ceremonial marker your tribe used for seasons and rituals, gone. The coastline your people lived on for centuries, gone. All beneath a relentless, unstoppable sea. This isn't myth, this is science. Archaeologists call one phase of this catastrophe Meltwater Pulse 1A, a period around 14,600 years ago when sea levels rose at a rate faster than anything humans had ever experienced. Some regions may have seen several meters of rise in just a few decades. For ancient communities, this would have been apocalyptic. They would have abandoned settlements, migrated inland, and carried only fragments of their culture with them. This helps explain something that appears in nearly every ancient culture on Earth: flood myths. From Mesopotamia's epic of Gilgamesh, to the biblical story of Noah, to the Hindu story of Manu, to the Greek flood of Deucalion, to Native American flood stories, to Australian Aboriginal myths. Every civilization has a story of a great flood that wiped out an earlier world. Coincidence? Or inherited memories preserved through generations? And if these myths are memories, then the sunken ruins we see today may be the physical evidence. Let's examine these ruins not just as stone, but as architecture, a language spoken through structure. Across the world we find recurring patterns, terraces that appear leveled intentionally, staircases carved with consistent riser heights, platforms large enough to host gatherings, rituals, or markets, megaliths placed in deliberate arrangements, rectangular foundations aligned along straight lines, road-like structures forming clear paths. These aren't isolated quirks of geology, these are the fingerprints of planning. Look at the Bimini Road in the Bahamas, flat block-like stones arranged in 2 layers. Some researchers insist it's natural. But the alignment and layout resemble early maritime structures found in later civilizations. Look at the underwater megalith off Sicily, 15 tons with a perfect split down the middle. Nature rarely splits monoliths with surgical precision. Look at the Gulf of Kampat, patterns on sonar imaging that match grid-based layouts. If these were natural, the odds of them forming such consistent geometry are staggeringly low. Look at Yonaguni, its platforms and staircases look like early prototypes of architectural planning, not random formations. These structures might not be the remains of cities in the modern sense. They might not be houses or temples or palaces, but they could be ceremonial sites, terraces for gatherings, meeting spaces, sacred platforms, markers for navigation, ritual complexes, early engineering experiments, or proto-urban spaces. Because even without agriculture, humans were still capable of cooperation, and cooperation leads to construction. Now let's shift perspective. Instead of imagining an ancient civilization with Stone Age simplicity, imagine a community of highly skilled survivalists, people who understood the environment intimately. They knew the tides, they tracked the stars, they built tools from obsidian, bone, and antler. They crafted shelters with stone foundations and wooden frames. They carved markers to signify boundaries or spiritual sites. They engineered platforms for ceremonies tied to seasons, solstices, or natural cycles. This wasn't a civilization with writing or metalwork, but it was a civilization with knowledge. Practical knowledge, environmental knowledge, architectural knowledge, and that knowledge was passed from generation to generation until the ocean took their world. Let's reconstruct one of their days. The sun rises on a wide, sweeping shoreline, far wider than any coastline you see today. Men sharpen their stone tools, preparing for a long day of fishing or hunting. Women dry fish on stone platforms, weaving nets, preparing food, teaching children to recognize edible plants. Elders pass down stories embedded with warnings about the sea, the storms, the cycles. When a ritual day arrives, the entire community gathers on a carved terrace overlooking the water. They dance, chant, or honor their ancestors. They mark the shifting seasons. They measure time and stars, waves, and shadows. This society understands balance between land and sea, between the past and present. And then climate catastrophe strikes. The shoreline shrinks, salt water infiltrates rivers, animals migrate away, storms intensify, floods carve through settlements. The community is forced inland. They abandon their terraces, they abandon their platforms, they abandon their sacred spaces. The ocean swallows everything. As centuries pass, the memory of their structures fades into legend. Then legend fades into myth. Then myth fades into silence. Only the stone remains, buried under layers of sediment, coral, and currents. Thousands of years later, divers rediscover these ruins. But by then, the context is gone. The culture is gone. The meaning is gone. We are left with architectural ghosts, monuments without stories, platforms without people, foundations without names. But these ruins pose a question that echoes through time. If humans were building stone structures 12,000 years ago, what else were they capable of? How many civilizations rose and fell before the first line of recorded history? How many early cultures reached levels of sophistication now erased? How many times did humanity climb toward civilization, only to be knocked back by nature? History may not be a straight line. It may be a cycle of rises and collapses, a repeating story etched into the fabric of our past. The sunken structures scattered across the world may be fragments of that story, pieces of an ancient puzzle waiting to be assembled. And here's the most incredible part. We've explored less than 1% of the world's ocean floor. Less than 1%. So if we've already found structures in Japan, India, Sicily, the Bahamas, the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, and beyond, imagine what still lies hidden. Entire settlements, entire rituals, entire cultural identities, entire networks of early humans, all submerged, preserved in darkness, untouched for millennia. This brings us to the heart of Episode 1, the sunken civilization that should not exist. Maybe the earliest civilization humanity ever built. And if that's true, we must rethink everything, from the origins of architecture to the rise of culture to the very definition of civilization. Our journey does not end here, because in Episode 2 we dive into the world-changing events that erased these ancient societies, the great flood civilizations, the cities that drowned overnight, the myths that carried their memories, and the evidence still being uncovered today. The ocean took their world, but not their story. These ruins beneath the waves tell us that an ancient civilization once lived where the ocean now rules. But they don't tell us how their world ended. For that, we must look to ancient legends, stories spoken long before writing was born. Stories of storms without mercy, stories of oceans rising in a single night, stories of civilizations wiped clean from the earth, stories so widespread they cannot be coincidence. In Episode 2, we search for the truth behind humanity's oldest memory, the Great Flood that erased an entire world. Stay with us.